Hello again. Today we're going to go through the in-class practice on section 9.6c. In case you were absent that day, you can look at this. So we're going to use factoring techniques about trinomials to solve for equations involving trinomials. All right, so number 1 and 2 are review from the last test that we took. So remember, we're just looking for two things that multiply to 10 and add to 7. And those numbers were 2 and 5. So this can factor really fast because it has a leading coefficient of 1. So we don't have to do the box. So we just say x plus 2, x plus 5 equals 0. Okay, and then we split this into two problems because if two numbers multiply to make 0, then one of those numbers must be 0. And remember, an expression is just a number in disguise, and we need to pick what x is before we know that number. So we can solve this here. We get -2 and -5. So here are my two answers. All right, number 2 is very similar. First, we have to set this equal to 0. So we'll go ahead and multiply this in and subtract the 20 over. And I should write that as 8p instead of p8. Okay, and then we're going to factor it. So trinomial is going to be set equal to 0, and then we factor. So in this case, two things that multiply to -20 and add to +8. That's going to be 10 and -2. So this will factor into p minus 2, this number, times p plus 10, this other number, and they multiply to make 0. So one of those numbers must be 0. So either p minus 2 is 0 or p plus 10 is 0. So when I solve these expressions individually, we get 2 or -10. All right. Number 3 and 4, we're not solving here, we're factoring. So same thing as before, we're going to use our box method. So two numbers that multiply to 18 and add to 19. Remember the 3 and 6. Okay. And the reason why we have to do the box method is because the 3, the leading coefficient, is not a 1. Okay. So these two numbers are easy. It's 18 and 1. So we'll make our box. 3w squared goes here, 6 goes there, and then we split the 19w into two places, 18w and 1w. All right, so if you look this way, 3w is the common factor, and that leaves behind w and 6. And then that means a 1 had to be here. So 6 times 1 for 6, and 1 times w for 1w. So this will factor into w plus 6 and 3w plus 1. Okay, remember this is our answer, and all of this is just scratch work. So you won't show this on a test or quiz, okay? All right. Second thing. So -36 and -5. And these two numbers are -9 and +4. They multiply to -36 and add to -5. So we'll do a box. This will give me 6z squared here. That's the first term. -6 in the bottom corner. That's the second term. And then we split the -5z into two places, -9z and +4z. Okay. So the GCF of the top two are 3z, and that left behind 2z and -3. That means I need a +2 here to multiply to get -6, and 2 times 2z also makes 4z, so I know I did it right. So this is going to be 2z minus 3 and 3z plus 2. All right, that concludes our first page. Let's flip it over and see what we mean by solving. So solving equations that involve trinomials. Okay, so recall the general form of a quadratic expression is ax squared plus bx plus c, where a, b, and c are just constants, so numbers in front of the variables there. Previously, we have only solved for trinomials, where a has a value of 1. However, the steps do not change here. So simplify both sides and get all terms on one side of the equation and 0 on the other. So we want to set our equation equal to 0. And then what's left on the left side is going to be a trinomial. We're going to factor it using our factoring techniques like the box method. And then we're going to set the two factors equal to 0. because two numbers that multiply to 0 mean that one number must be 0. Okay, and then we're going to solve the two linear equations to find both answers. All right, so here we go. Example here, so I get everything equal to 0, so I have 5x squared plus 12x plus 4 equals 0, and this equals 0 part is very important. All right, and then we factor the left side. So here we're going to factor this, split it into two linear equations, and we'll probably use our box method to help us. Okay, and then we'll solve each one of those separately. So x equals -2, or 5x equals -2, and then x is -2/5. And then we get our two answers here. All right, so down below our directions say solve each. Okay, so we're going to use our box method to help us. Okay, so you should get out some scratch paper, and I'm going to do the box method in number 2 spot and then flip it over. Okay, so we're looking for two things that multiply to -48. That's the -8 and 6, and add the -2. And we can start right with factoring because we already have the equals 0 part. So we have a trinomial on one side and we have 0 on the other. Okay, so this is going to be -8 and +6. So this is the box now. And we have 6x squared. We have -8. And then we split the -2x into -8x and +6x. The GCF for the top two is 2x. That leaves behind 3x, and it leaves behind -4. That means I need a +2 here to get 6x, okay? And 2 times -4 will make -8. So this is going to factor into 3x minus 4 and 2x plus 2 equals 0. All right. And then we split it into two problems. So 3x minus 4 is 0, or 2x plus 2 is 0. And then this will give us 3x equals 4, so x is 4/3, or 2x equals -2, so x is -1. Okay. All right. Quick hint here on number 1. Okay, I'm going to erase for a second. Once we get it equal to 0, if there is a number that will divide evenly into all of the coefficients of our trinomial and the constant term, we could do that first. So you could divide everything by 2 here. And this will give us 3x squared minus x minus 4 equals 0. This is a trick that will help you if the numbers are big to kind of shorten them down a little bit. Okay. So in this case, we would have to think of two numbers that multiply to -12 and add to -1. All right, we'd take a look at number 2 here, and we're going to make use of that trick to really help us with number 2. So I'm going to move the 7 over, set it equal to 0, and then if I look at all three terms here, I can notice the 7 divides evenly into everything. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. So m squared minus 2m plus 1 equals 0. And then we go, oh, well shoot, this is an easy one. This has a leading coefficient of 1 now. So this is much easier to factor. So just think of two numbers that multiply to 1 and add to -2. And those are both -1. So this turns into m minus 1, m minus 1 equals 0. Usually we would write this with a squared. Okay. Since it's the same thing twice, we only need to solve one of them. And there's our only answer. M is 1. All right, number 3. So I'm going to move the 15 over. I get -y squared minus 8y minus 15 equals 0. If I divide everything through by a negative, it's really nice. Change all of these to positive. And also now I have a leading coefficient of 1. So the two things that multiply to 15 and add to 8 are 3 and 5. I don't have to do any box method on this, okay, because I have a leading coefficient of 1. So then I split this into two parts. And we're done. Okay, so we get -3 and -5. All right, number 4, I move the 3n over. This will give me 6n squared minus 5n minus 14 equals 0. And there's no number that divides into 6, 5, and 14, so I'm stuck with doing my box method here. So I'm going to erase number 3 and show my work over here. Okay. So I'm looking at two numbers that multiply to 6 times 14 is negative 84 and add to negative 5. Okay. So if you're having trouble with this, remember you can pick up your calculator and you do negative 84 divided by 1. And those two don't work. And then negative 84 divided by 2, that gives you 2 and negative 42, that doesn't work. Negative 84 divided by 3, that gives me 3 and negative 28, they don't add up right. So negative 84 divided by 4 gives you 4 and negative 21, no. Negative 84 divided by 5 is a decimal. Negative 84 divided by 6 gives us 6 and negative 14, that doesn't work. Negative 84 divided by 7 gives you 7 and negative 12. And that works out really nice. Okay, so I'll use my box method. First place is 6n squared. The bottom right is minus 14. And we split negative 5n into two things, negative 12n and 7n. Okay, so the GCF for the top ones are 6n, and it leaves behind n and minus 2. And then down here, 7. Okay, so this is going to factor into n minus 2 times 6n plus 7. Split this into two problems. And solve each problem separately. Okay, that concludes our second page. Let's flip it over and see what we did on the back here. Okay, on our last page, we have two more problems. So first one is 6m squared plus 8m equals 0. So it's already equal to 0, but notice we don't have a trinomial here, we have a binomial. So we've already covered this earlier in the unit. So just a quick review problem in here. So remember, with a binomial that has the variables in both parts, we're just going to factor out the greatest common factor. In this case, it's going to be 2m, and it will leave behind 3m plus 4. So remember, this is more like undistributing, okay? All right, then we split this into two problems because it's still two expressions multiplied to make 0. So our first one is 2m equals 0, so m is 0. And our second one is 3m plus 4 is 0. So 3m is negative 4, and m is negative 4/3. So here are our two answers. All right, and our last one, we're going to move the 5r over. So 16r squared minus 8r, and we're going to move the 3 over, so we'll subtract 3, and now we have it equal to 0. And we need to do the box method on this one, so I'm going to erase number 5 and put it in its spot. So we want to think of two numbers that multiply to negative 48 and add to negative 8. Okay, and those numbers are going to be negative 12 and positive 4. So we'll make our box. We're going to put 16r squared here, negative 3 there, and then we split the negative 8 into negative 12r and positive 4r. Okay, and now I look at the top and I say, what's the same in both, which is 4r, and that leaves behind 4r and minus 3. And then minus 3 times positive 1 will make minus 3, and plus 1 times 4r will make 4r. So this is going to factor into 4r minus 3 and 4r plus 1. Okay, and then you split it into two problems. So 4r minus 3 is 0, and 4r plus 1 is 0. So that means 4r is 3, and r could be 3/4, or 4r is negative 1, and r could be negative 1/4. So those are our two answers, 3/4 or negative 1/4. All right, so here's a crude vertical motion model. This does not take into account for wind speed or any of those kind of things. So it's just saying, hey, nothing about how aerodynamic the object is. Just quick, makes a parabola. So it makes it look like it works in small things, but it doesn't really work for all, okay? So this crude vertical motion model is this formula. h equals negative 16t squared plus the velocity times t plus the starting. So h is any given height at time t, and v is our initial upwards or downwards velocity, and s is our starting height. So notice it doesn't talk about how far left or right it goes, just up and down. Okay? All right, so for example here, if a goalie throws a ball into the air at an initial height of 8 feet. So the goalie probably jumped up, threw the ball from up here. We want to know how long until it lands on the ground. Okay? The initial velocity is 28 feet per second, and we want the ball to hit the ground, so we want our h to be 0. So this is v is 28, h is 0, and the initial height, s, is 8. Okay? So we plug in these numbers. 0 for h, negative 16t squared, initial velocity of 28, and starting height of 8. Okay? So negative 4 divides evenly into all the parts, so 0 divided by negative 4 is 0. Negative 16 divided by negative 4 makes positive 4t squared. 28 divided by negative 4 makes negative 7t. And 8 divided by negative 4 makes negative 2. So this is a much easier thing to factor. The smaller you make the numbers, the easier it is. Okay? So I'll do the stuff over here. So negative 8 on top, negative 7 on the bottom. This is my scratch work. It's going to be negative 8 and 1. So we'll make a box. And we've got 4t squared. We have negative 2. And we can put in negative 8t and positive 1t. So on the top, we're getting down 4t. This leaves behind t minus 2. And since that has to be a plus 1 to multiply by minus 2 to make negative 2, and 1 times t will make 1t, so I know I factored it right. So I've got 0, 4t plus 1, t minus 2, and then we split this into two problems. So 4t plus 1 or t minus 2 equals 0. So over here, we're going to get negative 1 equals 4t, or t is negative 1/4. And then we're going to scratch it out, because it doesn't make sense that this ball fell 1/4 of a second backwards in time. On this side, we're going to solve this. We're going to get 2. So it says, how long did it take for the ball to hit the ground? It took 2 seconds. Okay, this concludes notes that we did in class. So if you were out that day, you can watch these and see what's going on and then complete the assignment. And the homework is the video notes on 9.7.